Welcome to this edition of the FinTech Hot Seat. I'm here with Alok Tyagi, the Chief Technology Officer of GTreasury. Today's topic is why modern Treasury technology matters. Welcome, Alok.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So I want to start off, instead of asking what's changing with Treasury, because what's changing with Treasury has an impact in many different organizations, in many different ways and different groups of an organization. I want to start off by asking you, what matters with technology? What are some of the key changes that are taking place that have an impact on Treasury? What do we need to think about?
So Craig, one of the best part of my job is really interacting and meeting with a lot of customers. And we generally find customers are in two categories. One set of customers are the one who are using spreadsheet still as a treasury. And the second set of customers are that are using some other TMS system, but they are replacing it. And the customers that are still using spreadsheet, it's very difficult for them to have a real-time view of the business. For them, it's manual, labor-intensive, go to a bank portal, pull the bank reports, really understanding what the cash position is, closing the report, and then really reconciling across different systems, extremely hard. You ask the treasury people there that how often and how quickly can you create report? It takes them days. So it's very difficult, very manual, and not really compliant. There are a lot of different weaknesses in the system. And to say the least, the valuable people within the treasury are working more manual work and not available to think strategically that what is the liquidity from an M&A perspective or divestiture perspective or anything else. So it's a big leap and a big positive when they come to a TMS system. So that's one set of challenges. And if you are using a TMS, but you have to replace, generally speaking, those customers finding out that their TMS doesn't cover the breadth and depth that they were expecting as the company grows. So it's just not about looking for a TMS that solves your need for today. You are actually looking to partner with a company that can solve for the need for tomorrow. Technologies are changing fast. So it's important to have that partnership that really is delivering innovation continuously. And if the company is not able to do that, it's very hard for those companies to really keep up. So those are two set of challenges depending on which spectrum of customers you fall in.
So the concept of changing expectations is prevalent in Treasury and other areas. I liked your comment about people are moving from spreadsheets, something that's essentially non-automated, or they're converting from older technology. Let's look at that for a moment now on the newer technology. What does a treasurer, you're a technologist, and focus on that, what does a treasury professional, a treasurer, someone senior in the organization need to think about with regards to technology? Isn't technology the same? How does it matter? We know technology changes, so what is changing and why does that matter in terms a treasurer can understand?
So there are a couple of thoughts. So if you look at the treasury and the financial professionals, one, they're looking for a digital backbone. And a backbone that covers all the different roles and personas in a treasury function. We generally look at treasury, our financial guys have a front office, a middle office, and a back office. Front office people are really more concerned about the cash and liquidity, doing short-term investments and those debts and FX aspect of it. The back office people are really looking for that all of these cash or whatever the front office people do really get reconciled pretty well from a GL perspective and the accounting perspective, whether it is cash accounting or hedge accounting. And likewise, the folks in the middle office are really concerned about the risk and want to make sure that there is not undue FX exposure or IR exposure given the macroeconomic environment is changing. So from a technology perspective, they are looking for a digital backbone where there is a single view of the data and it can really go back and forth depending on the roles, not within the enterprise, but also extending beyond the enterprise. Because a treasury guys, they work with tens, if not hundreds of banks, if not one ERP, multiple ERPs, couple of trading solutions like FXall, 360T, So there's a big digital ecosystem in which the Treasury system works. So they are looking for that kind of a solution. And they are looking for a partner that is using a SaaS kind of a solution, because in a SaaS environment, you can continuously innovate, you can deliver new capabilities on regular basis, you can keep customers current, and your solution is always compliant, because you can actually track down every cash position or a bank statement or whatever the detail is, and actually have a good audit. So from a compliance perspective, fraud perspective, business continuity perspective, you really get a much more secured end-to-end environment for all the different role that covers the treasury and financial professionals.
So this concept of a digital backbone, you laid it out as one version of the truth, whether it's data or connecting internal in the system. But you also started talking about how it addresses external areas. So maybe the first comment would be, how is that different from saying, let's just extend what we have on the accounting side from an ERP? That could extend the same version of the truth, but more the role of how are we connecting externally, right? Because treasurers are looking externally at least as much as they're looking internally. You look internally for trades, exposures, payments, but they're looking externally for market data, payments, bank information. They have a large ecosystem outside the organization. So how does that backbone work inside to connect to maybe other financial backbones and externally? What should we be thinking about as treasury professionals?
And this is where, Craig, there is a new buzzword that you may be also hearing. It's about APIs. So the modern treasury platforms that are on SaaS-enabled platforms are open platforms. So they are all driven by the APIs. And APIs are not only used for internally, but it's also about, think of it like a Lego block that fits into your ecosystem because of the APIs. And APIs provides a real-time way of connecting. So in the past, it was more about batch level of interaction. So people will be importing, exporting a lot of files. But these days, it's about through APIs. So you want to partner with companies, with your TMS provider that are open platform, API-enabled platform, because that way, it's more like a dial tone. So you can really connect into the TMS system through a wide variety of ecosystem that you have today and the ecosystem that you will need tomorrow. So you got to make sure that it fits the need. So API is a key enabler in really providing that digital ecosystem around the digital backbone that you are trying to create.
So if a company has a legacy ERP system that isn't enabled with API connectivity, it's only pushing files back and forth, does it still make sense to move to the modern technology? Is that preparation for the future? Is it just using that so you can connect externally? How do we think about that backbone with the right type of current technology that I think you're saying it's faster, it's quicker, it's less maintenance?
So this is where a good modern platform, there is a term in the technology space gets called forward compatibility. So it's modern for the ecosystem that's keeping up with APIs, but we live in a real world where there are some technologies that are still laggard. So it allows for still the older interfaces, whether it is the batch file upload or XML or any of the other file formats of the past, but it's taking you in the future where as the ecosystem starts to really grow into APIs, you actually now have a more real-time view of thing, a point in time where you can do that. So it basically allows both of those because it doesn't really break what we call it backward compatibility. So if your old ERP is still using file-based system, that's okay too. And the APIs don't negate that, it only takes you forward.
Some of what you're saying makes me think of the accounting domain. Having a faster close is crucial. Used to be 15 days, 12, 10, and they're pushing for 3 days. Now, that becomes, even that's an unacceptable time frame. That's a financial statement time frame. Treasury needs to see their exposures not a month later. Maybe it's today, maybe it's instantaneously. And so what you're talking about is the technology has to adapt to the new expectations, the new requirements, and some of these technologies can do it.
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, some of our customers, when we speak with them, They actually need their reports on regular basis, on daily basis, depending on where the exposure is. And some of them actually have to do the model on the minute notice basis, because when the geo environment changes, you want to be able to really see your exposure. And this is where the whole ecosystem, the good news is now the digital transformation that's happening around industry after industry. We all know how banks are changing towards becoming open banking systems. ERP vendors are also moving to cloud. Even the large big ERPs of Oracles and SAPs all are moving to the cloud. That movement is really bringing the high tide in this industry, where all of these newer generations of software are more API enabled. And you want to make sure your Treasury digital backbone really is enabled for that, so that now you have a more real-time dial tone, as opposed to more, the Telegram style of which is more delayed, but it's almost instantaneous.
So what's a dial tone?
So this is like always on. So, anytime you kind of get into the system, if it's always on, you got a dial tone.
I just had to say that, just for fun. Any final thoughts? I know you've talked about the horizon, what's going on into the future as we look forward. I mean, SaaS has dominated the Treasury space now for a while. Banks adopted it earlier. It's moved to the Treasury space in terms of new sales a number of years ago. The last year and a half, the total installed population is more SaaS than it is installed or some of the older technology. What's next? What's the next horizon, the next level?
I mean, Craig, I just can't, as a technologist, I just can't, from my enthusiasm perspective, this is probably the best time in the software space. The digital disruption that's happening, so many new technologies are coming up. In fact, the pace of technology and new innovation has never been faster. And if anything, it's getting faster with every day. So we look at technologies in three horizons, to your point. So our horizon one is always SaaS and APIs, the business intelligence, insightful reporting, which is part of our USP, where someone can really make a decision based on the report. So it's not about historical reporting, but something that's very intuitive. So those are horizon one. Horizon two is the set of technologies that are starting to become mainstream now. Like, for example, very exciting thing happening in the artificial intelligence and machine learning space. So it's no more about the rear view mirror, it's more about what's happening in the front. How can you, instead of having more reactive reporting, more preventive and more predictive kind of a reporting. Better forecasting. Forecasting not only for your cash position, but also look at your exposure and how you can really have some kind of a green highways where you can see, based on your historical perspective, what may happen in the future and how you can prevent it before something bad happens. So you will start to see the artificial intelligence or machine learning really mining a lot of the data and really start to protect, whether it is the fraud scenarios, forecast scenarios. Some of those new challenges that we are still starting to think about it will become the mainstream in the next couple of months and years. The other areas is, if you are still from the Horizon 2 perspective, Internet of Things is going to make a big impact in the Treasury space, and robotics process automation. You may be hearing a lot about that also, how it additionally automates and really improves a lot more efficiencies. Those are the set of technologies we look at that in the Horizon 2, which is now becoming mainstream. The next is what we are calling Horizon 3, which is things happening in the future in the next couple of years, next 1 or 2 years will become mainstream. Technologies like blockchain. At this conference, we are already starting to hear about it, that how blockchain is starting to really create that level of openness in the ecosystem, particularly these trading ecosystems, supply chain ecosystem. Very excited about it. What does that mean for the future of banking, future of Treasury, future of the financial professionals? So that's another set of technologies, along with technologies like quantum computing and all that. This is a pet peeve of mine, so I can speak on this topic all day long, covering all these horizons. But this is where, to the Treasury and financial professionals, it's one of the best time that how technology can enable people have a better quality of life in their everyday job, and they can really be far more strategic in their thinking.
So let's take one of those items on the Horizon 3, blockchain. Is that more important because it supports this open architecture where you can communicate and trade, is that more important? Is it more of the technology by itself? Is it what it delivers, or because of how it acts?
We will see the promise of blockchain is almost similar to the promise of internet. So if we go back 2 decades back, when internet was at its infancy, email was its first application.
And dial tone existed.
And dial tone existed, yeah. And now if we look back, what internet has done has revolutionized our life besides email. Blockchain has a very similar promise. In the current model of working, there are always concerns about security and trust. Blockchain, just the way the distributed ledger technologies work, once that becomes the mainstream as the whole ecosystem grows around it, it's virtually impossible to hack the system. So you will find out that in every aspect of our life, you will just have something that's always secured. That notion of breaches that we hear today will go away. The other notion that you will start to see as blockchain really becomes the way of life is there is always just one single version of truth. Today we have to do reconciliation because you are bringing information from a lot of different systems. If it's a blockchain-based system, there is only one version of truth. There is no concept of reconciliation, and that's the only thing that prevails. So blockchain has extremely empowering promise. The only thing is that we have to grow the entire ecosystem around it. So time when it comes, we will find out that it will be just a very new way of internet and the new set of innovations that will come out.
So to wrap up the blockchain discussion, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, does blockchain, for this reconciliation, is it, we think about moving technology to make things more efficient, taking out cost and time. Is this it just leapfrogs it? You're seeing it will take out steps and eliminate what needs to be done. And we're not just trying to arbitrage faster and better, we're eliminating an entire process.
Totally. In fact, there will be a completely new way of relooking the old problems with a new set of processes and practices where some of the whether it's reconciliation or actually knowing, the KYC aspect, many of these different things will have those kind of problems just will not exist in that kind of a system because there's only one version of truth.
I think that's excellent. I think that has a lot of implications for how we think about our careers in Treasury, what we need to be gearing ourselves up for. These changes don't take place instantly, just like it took probably about 14, 15 years for SaaS to replace install as the dominant provider. The next steps seem to be moving faster, so we have to be looking ahead, not looking back. Thank you very much for your time, Alok.
Thank you, Craig, for having me.